Since I started my Facebook page about 2 months ago, I've been actively searching for news stories about hiking in the outdoors that I could post on that page. During that time, I have been surprised by the number of stories I found about hikers disappearing, or getting lost and getting rescued, or getting lost before finding their way, or otherwise getting trapped or injured in the wilds. Some people are still missing, and some have died. In some cases, it has taken a long time to find the body. I suppose I was surprised in part because this is the era of smartphones and GPS devices. And, on the face of it, many if not most hikers are on trails, and trails are fairly easy to follow. The Appalachian Trail, for example, is well marked, and different trail guides contain a lot of detail. Statistically speaking, it's a very rare event if an AT hiker gets so lost that he or she will go missing. Most of the hikers I have read about got lost in the American West. In the West, some popular areas have no defined trails, and some areas there are not as well marked as the AT. Also, based on what I have read, the risk of injury or death by falling down a steep hill or cliff is considerably higher in the West, but it also happens in the East. I have posted only a few of these stories on Facebook because, rightly or wrongly, I soon decided I was finding too many to deal with. It's not my goal here to analyze or make guesses on exactly what happened to any of those specific individuals. Instead, I'm going to focus on what we can do as outdoor enthusiasts to keep our own selves out of trouble. Some things like weather or accidents we cannot always control, but I believe each of us can do a great deal to avoid one nasty outdoor peril, and that peril is getting lost. The kind of lost when we have no idea on how to get ourselves back to civilization. I will put the emphasis here on not getting lost in the first place, which is the best thing we can do for ourselves. If we do get lost and cannot manage to get out in one day, what will happen in 3 days, or 10 days, or 20 days? Will we then stand a better chance of getting ourselves out? Another consideration is some of those stories show that missing hikers can be mighty hard to find even if a search is underway. I have some limited personal experience in this. It happened in the era before cell phones, but the memory is still vivid. I was once only a few miles away from one man who got lost in the woods and was found dead 2 days later. The following year, I got lost in the same general area. I had to rely on my own wits to get out of that mess. When I got lost, it was a surprise. It was a very nasty surprise, and the fact I was surprised is evidence that the danger of getting lost was just about the last thing on my mind until it happened. Despite the fact I was experienced in the outdoors, I was not paying the right kind of attention to what I was doing. And that, I believe, is the number one lesson to be emphasized at the outset. We are best served in the outdoors if we maintain constant awareness about our location every single minute. This won't prevent every potential problem, but it certainly will prevent some bad ones. I must emphasize I am not telling my story to congratulate myself for getting out on my own. Instead, this is a story about how I screwed up in the first place and what I think I learned from it. There are a variety of precautions one can take against the possibility of getting lost. Virtually all of them I would endorse. For example, one is letting people know where we are hiking or camping. But, if given a choice, which of these scenarios would we prefer? One in which our friends or family realize our return is long overdue and the authorities must be notified? Or one in which we return home safe and sound under our own power? If our first choice is the latter, we cannot overestimate the value of our own self-reliance. And that requires constant awareness and vigilance in the outdoors. If we have doubts that we are moving in the right direction, I would suggest that's the time to pay close attention to what's behind us. We might have to backtrack. I would turn around and look for any landmark or feature that would remind me which direction I came from. And I would make a note of which direction I turned if I hit a trail intersection. I also would double check the map or trail guide if I hadn't done it already. For those who don't know, a search by public agencies often will have a cost associated with it that could reach tens of thousands of dollars. In some states in the USA and under some circumstances, the lost and/or rescued individual has been given a bill and was expected to pay that cost. I got lost in the woods covering about 3,000 acres. The fellow who died got lost in an even bigger woods. We both got lost in northern Ontario, where there are hundreds of thousands of acres of government-owned wilderness. Neither one of us was hiking, we were both hunting. Based on my internet searches, lost hikers outnumber lost hunters by a wide margin. Hikers are out almost year-round, while hunters are usually out only when game is in season. The terrain in northern Ontario is mostly flat and heavily wooded. Visibility is limited. Distant mountains that could serve as landmarks are not found where I got lost. The fellow who died had some disadvantages I did not have. He was on a guided hunt, but he died alone. I was not guided. This means the other guy had not been exploring the terrain for weeks like I had. He got lost at night and probably died that same night. I got lost in the morning. He got lost in freezing weather and it started to snow. I got lost in reasonably warm weather. I got lost next to this power line. This view is northward. I got lost on the right side of the photo, east of the power line. I went into the trees looking for a place to put a tree stand. I was paying more attention to what I was looking for compared to what I was actually seeing. And that got me lost. I knew that to get out, I needed to go west, but I found I had left my compass in the car. It was 10:30 in the morning and the sun was shining through the trees. I knew that shadows would be pointing north or very close to it at noon. I also knew that shadows move clockwise. I made a guess that the shadows were pointing northwest. I positioned myself so the sun was shining over my left shoulder and I started walking. As it turned out, I indeed was walking dead west, but I should have been walking southwest. I had a big advantage in that all I had to do to rescue myself was find the power line. The result was I hit the power line north of where I had left it. Even so, that was enough. I was no longer lost. The scariest thing happened about 20 minutes after I got back to my car. The sky turned overcast and stayed that way for 3 days. If I had not walked out when I did, I most likely would have been stuck in there for that 3 days. In terrain like that, people often tend to walk around in circles. Trying to walk in a straight line with no sun or landmarks would have been beyond me. How did I know shadows point north at noon? The answer is I was a science club nerd in high school. Shadows point north within a handful of degrees. At noon, if we are well north of the Tropic of Cancer and well south of the Arctic Circle. However, this did not all immediately click in my mind at the time. I had to sit down and draw diagrams in the dirt to convince myself I was remembering this stuff correctly and I could get it to work. Again, I was making a guess about where the shadows were pointed at 10:30 a.m. If we assume the sun rises in the dead east every day of the year, no matter where we are, we're buying into a mistaken assumption. The spot where the sun rises at any particular location will vary throughout the year. Later, I'll tell you where you can learn more about this. It's also possible to find north with a watch and the sun. When I was lost, I could not remember how to do that. It's also possible to drive stakes in the ground and watch the shadows for half an hour to find north. But you need nice, flat, bare ground and 30 minutes of spare time, and I had neither. You also need ground without trees casting big shadows everywhere. I didn't have that either. I learned later that when some people get lost, they often panic and run. I can tell you that when I began to walk out, I certainly had the urge to run. As I walked out, I kept thinking of the hunter who died the year before. As I said, I was camping not far from where he died. Every day, a hunting guide drove down the logging road that I was camped on. The morning after the hunter died, that guide told me the man was missing. The hunter apparently had shot a black bear close to sundown and left his tree stand, heading into the bush to track the bear. I was told that if I heard the hunter in the woods, I should try to retrieve him. The next day, the guide told me searchers found the man's rifle. The day after that, they found his body. As I was trying to walk out and find that power line, I understood why they found the man's rifle first. I am convinced he threw the rifle to the ground so he could run. This man was lost after sundown. He probably didn't know it, but there was a lot of swampy standing water in that area. A lot of that water surrounded thick vegetation, which means we might not know the water was there until we stepped in it. If any of us was running and fell into water like that in the dark, it would have been a catastrophe on that night. We would have been soaking wet in freezing temperature with snow about to fall. I remember that next morning vividly. It was early May and more than an inch of snow fell overnight. I also can assure you the day I got lost was the last time I ever stepped between two trees without a compass. And I have never entered the woods without knowing if I was heading north or south or whatever direction. Because if I go north to enter a woods, I have to go south to leave that woods. So I look at my compass before I go into the trees. It's also true that when I got lost, I had no gear except for a gun, a cigarette lighter, and a pocket knife. After that trip, I never went hunting again without a space blanket, not one but two compasses, a flashlight of some kind of rain gear, plus some water and food. I almost always carry a map, and I'm ready to make a fire at any time. These things I have on me every minute while hunting, regardless of the circumstances. If we are backpacking, there's hardly any compelling need to add a space blanket to our gear, but many who get into trouble are day hikers who are carrying very little. We might be tempted to think an emergency item like a space blanket is a silly thing that would be of limited help in a real emergency, but if we force ourselves to carry one, every time we look at it, we are reminding ourselves that getting lost is a hazard. And that is a much better choice than the choice I displayed when I acted as if getting lost was totally impossible. It was not impossible. If I am day hiking, I will always carry an extra layer like a rain jacket or a jacket in case the weather gets worse. At first, I carried emergency stuff in a day pack. Later, I got this fanny pack for hunting. If you need another example of the stupid-ass stuff I have done, I once wandered from my tent in the dark with no flashlight and had one hell of a time just finding my way back to the tent. Now I carry a small fanny pack while backpacking, so there's always a flashlight in that fanny pack, and I always have the fanny pack with me every minute. I also developed the habit of obtaining and using detailed topographical maps. Before that, I had used road maps. But we should remember, topographical maps don't show us everything. Thick and dense vegetation, ground covered with rocks and boulders, beaver ponds, deep ravines, and cliffs up to 10 feet tall will not be shown on many, if not most, topographical maps. When hiking, for example, on a long trail like the AT, carrying a whistle is an excellent idea. In other videos, I have told how the average AT hiker is quick to react if he or she finds another hiker in trouble. If we are in trouble, a whistle could help us attract another hiker's attention. There are, of course, a variety of electronic devices we can carry into the outdoors. They are great when the batteries are not dead, when we don't fall into a river and ruin them, and if we have a clear satellite or cell signal. When the subject of getting lost in the wilds is discussed, the element of rescue is almost always mentioned. But when that bear hunter got lost, his guides started looking for him very quickly. Yet he did not survive. With all of our 21st century electronics, people are still going missing in the outdoors. Sometimes they are found, sometimes their bodies are found, and sometimes they are not. I have read online stories about someone who is lost who has successfully signaled a search party. For example, they built a fire or used a signal mirror. In these examples, authorities were already searching for the missing person. So far, I have found no example of anyone signaling an aircraft or vehicle and being rescued unless such a search was already underway. I plan more videos on avoiding trouble in the outdoors. I will give an in-depth look at many issues that I have mentioned here only briefly. One topic will be using the sun to find north. This is not always a simple process. For finding north with the sun, the watch method is probably the quickest, but unless we write it down, we might forget how to do it. And if we're going to carry the directions on how to do it, we might as well carry a good compass instead. The sun's position relative to the compass will vary depending on the time of day, the time of year, and the longitude and latitude of observation. In the description, I have put a link to a University of Oregon webpage that can be used to calculate the sun's position on any day from any location. I urge you to take a look at it. I should point out that most of those news stories I mentioned were found by doing a Google News search for the phrase missing hiker. In April 2016, you should be able to find those stories if you scroll through enough pages. And again, you can also set up a Google News alert. And with that, we are once again done. I extend my heartfelt thanks to all of my subscribers. If you have not yet subscribed, it would be much appreciated. And as always, thanks a million for watching.